Cut off from Christmas, I answered with a public ultimatum that shocked them both. And by morning, he had to face every bill he thought he'd escaped. The call came on December 15th, just 10 days before Christmas. I was sitting in my leather recliner, the one my late wife Sarah had picked out 20 years ago, watching the evening news and sipping hot cocoa when my phone buzzed against the side table. My daughter Emma's name lit up the screen, and I smiled despite the exhaustion in my bones from another long day at the construction office. "Hey, sweetheart," I answered, settling deeper into the worn cushions. "How are you and the kids doing?" The pause on the other end should have warned me, should have prepared me for what was coming. But after 34 years of being Emma's father, I'd grown accustomed to her dramatic silences before launching into stories about her day. "Dad, we need to talk about Christmas." Her voice carried that particular tone I'd learned to recognize over the decades. The same inflection she'd used at 16 when she'd wrecked my truck, at 22 when she'd dropped out of college for the third time, at 28 when she'd announced her divorce from Marcus. It was the voice of someone about to ask for something they already knew the answer to. "Of course, honey. Are we still doing Christmas Eve at your place like always? I've already wrapped the presents for Jake and Sophie. Found this amazing remote control helicopter for Jake that I think he'll love, and Sophie's getting that art set she's been talking about nonstop." Another pause. Longer this time. Through the phone, I could hear the muffled sounds of her house, the television playing some cartoon, the dishwasher humming, the ordinary soundtrack of a family evening that I'd been part of for 8 years since her divorce. "Dad, here's the thing. Marcus is coming for Christmas this year." The words hit me like a physical blow. Marcus, her ex-husband, the man who'd walked out on Emma and the kids 3 years ago to pursue his music career in Nashville. The man who'd missed birthdays, school plays, soccer games, and every significant moment in his children's lives while I'd stepped in to fill the void he'd left behind. "Marcus is coming?" I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. The kids must be so excited to see their father." "Yeah, they are. And Dad, I know this is going to sound difficult, but Marcus feels like it would be better if it was just the 4 of us this Christmas. You know, like a family reunion kind of thing." The hot cocoa turned bitter in my mouth. 23 Christmases. 23 years of waking up before dawn to watch Jake and Sophie tear through wrapping paper. 23 years of cooking my famous Christmas morning pancakes while Emma curled up on the couch in her pajamas, laughing at her children's excitement. 23 years of being the reliable presence, the steady grandfather who never missed a holiday, never forgot a birthday, never let them down. "A family reunion," I repeated slowly. "And where exactly do I fit into that picture, Emma?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could picture her in her kitchen, probably leaning against the granite countertops I'd helped install when she'd bought the house after the divorce. The same kitchen where I'd taught Jake to make scrambled eggs, where I'd helped Sophie with her math homework countless evenings, where I'd been family for 3 years while Marcus chased his dreams 2 states away. Dad, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Marcus and I are talking about maybe getting back together, for the kids' sake, and having you there would just complicate things." Getting back together, with the man who'd abandoned her when things got difficult, with the father who'd chosen his guitar over his children's bedtime stories, with the husband who'd left her crying on my shoulder more nights than I could count, wondering how she'd manage the mortgage and the kids and the overwhelming weight of doing everything alone. "Emma," I said carefully, "Marcus left you. He walked away from his responsibilities, from his family. I've been here every day since then, helping with the kids, helping with the house, being the father figure Jake needed and the grandfather both children deserved. I know that, Dad, and I appreciate everything you've done. But Marcus is their father, and he's my husband, and we deserve a chance to rebuild without outside interference." Outside interference. That's what I'd become. Not the man who'd driven to her house at midnight when Sophie had a fever and the emergency room was too scary to face alone. Not the grandfather who'd attended every school event Marcus had missed. Not the father who'd co-signed her mortgage when her credit wasn't good enough on its own. Just outside interference. So where am I supposed to spend Christmas, Emma? The question hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. I'd spent every Christmas for the past 8 years, surrounded by the laughter of grandchildren, the warmth of family traditions, the joy of being needed and wanted and loved. Now I was facing the prospect of Christmas Day alone in this empty house, surrounded by wrapped presents I'd never get to give, and memories of holidays that apparently meant more to me than they did to anyone else. Maybe you could visit Aunt Linda in Phoenix or take a cruise. You always said you wanted to travel more after Mom died. A cruise. She wanted me to take a cruise while she played house with the man who'd broken her heart and abandoned his children. While she erased 3 years of my presence from their family narrative, pretending that Marcus had never left, that I'd never stepped in, that our Christmas traditions had never mattered. Emma, those children call me Papa. Jake tells people I'm his best friend. Sophie draws pictures of our family that include me. Are you really going to explain to them that Papa isn't welcome at Christmas anymore because Daddy decided he wants to play family again? Her voice hardened. Dad, you're being dramatic. The kids will understand. They want their parents back together. They want their real family. Real family. The phrase cut deeper than any physical wound. I looked around my living room at the photos covering every surface. Emma's graduation from high school, Jake's first day of kindergarten, Sophie's piano recital, birthday parties and summer vacations and ordinary Tuesday afternoons that had somehow become the most precious memories of my life. All of it apparently less real than the fantasy Marcus was offering. I see, I said quietly. Well, I wouldn't want to interfere with your real family reunion. Dad, don't be like that. You know I love you. This isn't about love, it's about giving my marriage another chance. Love. She loved me, but not enough to include me in Christmas. She loved me, but not enough to stand up to Marcus's demands. She loved me, but not enough to remember who had been there when love wasn't convenient or easy or socially acceptable. Emma, I need to go. I have some thinking to do. Dad, wait, don't hang up angry. I need you to understand why this is important to me. But I was already reaching for the end call button, my hands steadier than they'd been in months. For 3 years, I'd been the solution to every problem Marcus had created by leaving. The babysitter when Emma needed to work late, the handyman when the water heater died, the shoulder to cry on when the loneliness became too heavy to bear alone, the checkbook when unexpected expenses threatened to overwhelm her single-parent budget. I'd been useful, convenient, reliable, but I'd never been irreplaceable. The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the hardwood floor Sarah and I had installed ourselves 40 years ago. Around me, the house felt different, emptier. Not because Emma had uninvited me from Christmas, but because I was finally seeing clearly what I'd been refusing to acknowledge for months. I'd been replaced before Marcus ever came back to town. I'd just been too blind to notice. Standing up from Sarah's chair, I walked to the mantel where dozens of family photos told the story of a life I'd thought was mine. Emma's wedding to Marcus, back when he'd been a devoted husband and father. The kids as babies, toddlers, school-aged children who'd grown up calling me Papa, while their real father chased dreams that mattered more than they did. Christmas mornings and birthday celebrations and ordinary moments that had felt like everything but apparently meant nothing. Tomorrow, I'd start making phone calls. Not to book a cruise or visit Aunt Linda in Phoenix. Not to find somewhere else to be unwanted and unnecessary while my daughter played house with the man who'd abandoned her. No. Tomorrow I'd start making the kind of calls that would remind Emma exactly what she was throwing away for her family reunion. The kind of calls that would make Marcus's Christmas gift to her look pathetic in comparison to what I was about to give him. Because after 34 years of being Emma's father, I'd learned something important about love. Real love doesn't abandon people when things get difficult. Real love doesn't ask people to choose between family members. And real love definitely doesn't throw away 3 years of devotion for the promise of something that had already failed once before. Marcus wanted his family back. Emma wanted her husband back. The kids wanted their parents back together. Well, I was about to give them exactly what they wanted, along with a Christmas gift that would make this holiday unforgettable for all of them. Some gifts, after all, keep on giving long after Christmas morning is over. I spent that night in Sarah's old rocking chair, the one where she'd nursed Emma as a baby, staring out the window at the Christmas lights twinkling in my neighbor's windows. Normal families preparing for normal holidays. families where grandfathers weren't suddenly deemed inconvenient obstacles to reconciliation fantasies. By morning, my grief had crystallized into something much more focused, something that felt like justice wrapped in holiday paper. My first call was to Jerry Hoffman at First National Bank. We'd known each other for 15 years, ever since I'd started my construction business and needed commercial loans. Jerry had been there through every expansion, every equipment purchase, every financial milestone that had built my company from a one-man operation into something substantial. "Richard, good to hear from you. Merry Christmas, my friend. What can I do for you?" I settled into my home office, the one Sarah had insisted I needed when the business started growing. The walls were covered with photos of job sites, completed projects, the tangible evidence of 4 decades of hard work. "Jerry, I need to discuss the loan I co-signed for Emma 3 years ago, the mortgage on her house." A pause. I could hear papers shuffling in the background. "Of course. That's a joint mortgage, correct? You're both on the title and the loan documents." "That's right. And I need to understand my options regarding that arrangement." Jerry's voice shifted to professional caution. "Richard, is there a problem with the payments? Because the account shows current status." "No payment problems. But circumstances have changed, and I need to know what happens if I want to remove my name from that loan." More paper shuffling. The sound of Jerry protecting himself and the bank from whatever family drama was about to unfold. "Well, technically, as a co-signer, you'd need Emma to refinance in her own name. Given current interest rates and her income level, that might be challenging. May I ask what's prompted this inquiry?" I looked out my office window at the bird feeder Emma had given me for Father's Day 2 years ago. She'd installed it herself, spending an entire Saturday afternoon digging the post hole and leveling the platform. We'd watched Cardinals and Blue Jays together every morning since then, sharing coffee and conversation while the grandkids slept in on weekends. "Family circumstances have evolved, Jerry. I just need to understand my legal position." "I see. Well, Richard, there is another option. Since you're equally responsible for the loan, you could technically demand sale of the property to satisfy the debt. It's called partition, though I've never seen anyone actually pursue it in a family situation." Partition. The word had a finality to it that made my chest tighten. "And how would that work exactly?" "You'd petition the court to force sale of the property. The proceeds would be divided according to ownership percentages. Given that you provided the down payment and have been making most of the mortgage payments, you'd likely be entitled to the majority of equity." I thanked Jerry and hung up, but I wasn't finished making calls. My next conversation was with Margaret Chen, the family attorney who'd handled Sarah's estate and helped me set up my business structure. Margaret had known Emma since she was in high school, had attended her wedding, had been there through the divorce proceedings when Marcus decided his music mattered more than his marriage. "Richard, what a pleasant surprise, though you sound troubled. Is everything all right?" Margaret's office was downtown in one of those renovated brick buildings that tried to balance professional respectability with small-town warmth. I'd been there many times over the years, usually for routine business matters, occasionally for more serious discussions about estate planning and protecting assets I'd worked a lifetime to build. "Margaret, I need to discuss some family legal matters, confidentially." "Of course, what's on your mind?" I explained the situation carefully, leaving out the emotional devastation and focusing on the practical realities. Emma's decision to exclude me from Christmas, Marcus's return, and the apparent reconciliation. The 3 years I'd spent supporting the household while the children's father pursued his dreams in Nashville. "I see. And what outcome are you hoping to achieve, Richard?" That was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? Revenge felt too crude, too destructive. Justice seemed more appropriate, but justice for what exactly? For being discarded when I was no longer useful? For having my role in the family erased to accommodate Marcus's convenient return? "I want them to understand what they're throwing away, Margaret. I want consequences for treating family like disposable conveniences." Margaret was quiet for a long moment. I could picture her in her corner office, surrounded by law books and family photos, calculating the legal and emotional costs of what I was contemplating. "Richard, you have several options, though I'd caution you to consider the long-term implications. You could demand immediate repayment of the loans you've made to Emma over the years. You could withdraw financial support going forward. You could exercise your rights regarding the mortgage co-signing arrangement." What about the gifts I've given the children? The college funds I've established for Jake and Sophie? Those are more complex. The college funds, if they're in your name with the children as beneficiaries, you maintain control over. The gifts would be harder to reclaim legally, though you could certainly modify future gift-giving plans. I spent another hour with Margaret, exploring options I'd never imagined I'd need to consider. By the time I hung up, I had a clear understanding of my legal position and several strategies for moving forward. None of them felt good, but they all felt necessary. My third call was to Emma herself. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright with the forced cheerfulness I remembered from her childhood when she'd broken something valuable and was trying to minimize the consequences. "Dad, I'm so glad you called. I was worried about how we left things yesterday. I hope you understand why this is important for our family." Our family. There was that phrase again, the one that apparently didn't include me anymore. "Emma, I've been thinking about our conversation, and I have some concerns I need to discuss with you." "Of course, Dad. I want you to be okay with this. Maybe after the holidays we can all sit down together. You and Marcus and me, work out some kind of arrangement where everyone's comfortable." An arrangement, like I was a difficult neighbor whose dog barked too loud, requiring negotiations to maintain peace in the subdivision. "Actually, sweetheart, I need to discuss some practical matters with you. Financial matters that can't wait until after the holidays." The brightness in her voice dimmed slightly. "What kind of financial matters?" I looked around my office at the evidence of 40 years of hard work. The awards from the Chamber of Commerce, the photos with mayors and city council members at ribbon-cutting ceremonies, the certificates recognizing my contributions to local charities and community development projects. All of it built through discipline, sacrifice, and the kind of long-term thinking that apparently didn't matter when immediate gratification was available. "Emma, over the past 3 years, I've provided significant financial support for your household. The mortgage co-signing, the emergency loans, the regular assistance with utilities and household expenses. I need to know how you plan to handle those obligations going forward." "Dad, what are you talking about? You know I'm grateful for everything you've done. But you've always said family helps family. That's what we do. Family helps family. Unless family becomes inconvenient, unless family complicates the narrative you want to tell about your fresh start." "You're absolutely right, Emma. Family helps family, which is why I'm confused about being excluded from Christmas while Marcus, who abandoned his family responsibilities, is welcomed back with open arms." Dad, please. This isn't about choosing sides. This is about giving my marriage another chance." I could hear the defensive edge creeping into her voice, the same tone she'd used as a teenager when caught in contradictions between her words and actions. "Emma, I want you to understand something clearly. My financial support for your household has been based on being part of your family. If that relationship is changing, then the financial arrangements need to change as well." The silence on her end was different now, not the dramatic pause of someone preparing to ask for something, but the stunned quiet of someone realizing the ground had shifted beneath their feet. "Are you threatening to cut off support because you can't come to Christmas dinner?" "I'm explaining that family relationships have mutual obligations. You can't benefit from my financial assistance while excluding me from family gatherings. That's not how family works, sweetheart." "Dad, that's blackmail." The accusation stung because it contained a grain of truth, but it also revealed how she'd been thinking about our relationship. I was the ATM that dispensed money and support without expecting anything in return. The reliable grandfather who could be counted on to show up, pay up, and shut up when his presence became inconvenient. "No, Emma. Blackmail is threatening harm for personal gain. I'm simply clarifying the terms of our relationship going forward. If I'm not family enough to be included in Christmas, then I'm not family enough to be financially responsible for your household." "Dad, you're scaring me. This doesn't sound like you." She was right about that. The old me would have swallowed the hurt, accepted the exclusion, and probably sent an even more expensive gift to compensate for not being there in person. The old me would have prioritized keeping peace over demanding respect. But the old me had died somewhere between her phone call and this morning's legal consultations. "Emma, I want you to have a wonderful Christmas with Marcus and the children. I truly do. But I also want you to understand that actions have consequences and choices have costs." "What does that mean, Dad? What are you planning to do?" I looked at the calendar on my desk. December 16th. 9 days until Christmas. 9 days for Emma to realize what she was throwing away. 9 days for Marcus to prove he was ready to be the husband and father he'd never been before. 9 days for me to implement a plan that would give them exactly what they had asked for, along with everything that came with it. What it means, Emma, is that you're about to learn what independence actually costs. I hung up before she could respond, my hands steadier than they'd been since this whole mess started. The house felt different now, charged with purpose instead of weighted down by grief. I had work to do. My fourth call was to Dave Patterson at Patterson Financial Services. Dave had been managing my investment portfolio for 12 years, helping me build the kind of wealth that comes from decades of careful planning and disciplined saving. The kind of wealth that had allowed me to be generous with Emma without thinking twice about the cost. "Richard, always a pleasure. How can I help you today?" Dave, I need to liquidate some positions and restructure my accounts. Specifically, I want to establish separate trusts and modify some existing arrangements. Certainly. Are we talking about estate planning adjustments or something more immediate? I pulled out the legal pad where I'd been making notes since my conversation with Margaret. Names, numbers, dates, and dollar amounts that told the story of 3 years of financial support that Emma had apparently taken for granted. Both. I need to establish educational trusts for my grandchildren that can't be accessed or modified by their parents. I also need to restructure the accounts I've been using to support my daughter's household expenses. Dave's keyboard clicked in the background as he pulled up my files. I see several automatic transfers here to Emma's accounts, monthly amounts that total quite a bit annually. Are you looking to modify those arrangements? I'm looking to terminate them, effective immediately. Another pause. Dave had seen enough family financial drama over the years to recognize the warning signs. "Richard, I want to make sure you've thought this through completely. These kinds of changes can have significant emotional implications along with the financial ones. I've thought about little else for the past 18 hours, Dave. I want those transfers stopped today. I also want to establish new accounts that Emma has no knowledge of or access to." Understood. What about the existing college funds for Jake and Sophie? Those are currently structured as custodial accounts with Emma as the adult supervisor. I'd been dreading this part of the conversation. The college funds represented years of careful planning, monthly contributions that had grown into substantial nest eggs for both children's educational futures. Money I'd set aside specifically because I wanted Jake and Sophie to have opportunities their grandfather never had. I want those restructured as well. New trusts with me as the sole trustee until the children reach 25. Emma loses all access and oversight. That's going to require some paperwork and legal documentation. How quickly do you need this completed? I looked at my calendar again. Christmas was racing toward us like a freight train, and I wanted everything in place before Emma and Marcus exchanged their reunion gifts under the tree I wouldn't be there to see. I need it done by December 23rd, whatever it takes. The rest of that afternoon was spent in a blur of phone calls, document reviews, and financial restructuring that would have taken weeks under normal circumstances. But Dave Patterson hadn't built his business by making excuses, and by 5 o'clock, I had confirmation that Emma's financial safety net was being systematically dismantled. The automatic transfer of $1,500 per month to her checking account? Terminated. The backup credit line I'd established for household emergencies? Closed. The college funds that had given her peace of mind about her children's futures? Restructured beyond her reach or influence. But I wasn't finished, not even close. My next call was to Tom Bradley, who owned Bradley Construction Supply. Tom had been providing materials for my job since I'd started the business, and over the years, we'd developed the kind of relationship that went beyond simple vendor and customer. We were friends who understood each other's struggles and respected each other's work. "Richard, what's happening, my friend? Please tell me you've got another big project coming up. January's looking pretty slow." "Actually, Tom, I've got something different in mind, something more personal." I explained what I needed, watching the winter sun set through my office window as I outlined a plan that would demonstrate exactly what kind of grandfather Marcus was replacing. Tom listened without interruption, occasionally asking clarifying questions that showed he understood both the practical and emotional dimensions of what I was proposing. "Richard, that's going to cost some serious money. Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." And the timeline? You want this completed by Christmas Eve? Christmas Eve morning? I want it to be the first thing they see when they wake up. Tom was quiet for a moment, probably calculating logistics and labor costs and the kind of overtime payments that would be required to make this happen on such short notice. You know what, Richard? After everything you've done for the community over the years, after all the business you've sent my way, I think we can make this work. It's going to be expensive, but it's going to be spectacular. After hanging up with Tom, I sat in the gathering darkness of my office, surrounded by the evidence of a life built through hard work and careful planning. Tomorrow would bring a new phase of this plan, one that would require conversations I'd never imagined having and arrangements that would change everything for Emma and Marcus and the children. But tonight, I allowed myself one moment of satisfaction. For the first time since Emma's phone call, I felt like I was moving toward something instead of just reacting to hurt and disappointment. My phone buzzed with a text message from Emma. "Dad, I think we should talk more about this. Can you come over for dinner tomorrow? The kids miss you." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling the familiar tug of love and longing that had made me such an easy target for manipulation over the years. The kids did miss me. I missed them too, more than I could bear to single word. Busy. Then I turned granted were two entirely different things. I typed back a "so acknowledge," but missing someone and being taken forward off my phone and walked to the kitchen to heat up a frozen dinner. Tomorrow would bring more phone calls, more arrangements, more steps toward giving Emma and Marcus exactly what they'd asked for. Tonight, I was going to eat my solitary meal and plan the kind of Christmas gift that would remind them both what they'd thrown away. Some lessons I was learning could only be taught through loss, and some gifts could only be appreciated after they were gone. The irony wasn't lost on me that Marcus was about to receive the most expensive Christmas present of his life, courtesy of the grandfather he was so eager to replace. I just hoped he understood how to say thank you properly, because after December 25th, there wouldn't be any more gifts coming from this particular Santa Claus. The morning of December 17th dawned gray and bitter, the kind of Colorado winter day that made you grateful for warm houses and reliable heating systems. I was up before sunrise, coffee in hand, reviewing the checklist I'd compiled the night before. Every item represented another step toward giving Emma and Marcus their perfect family Christmas, complete with all the responsibilities they'd apparently forgotten came with independence. My first stop was Denver Metro Credit Union, where I'd maintained business accounts for over a decade. Linda Morrison, the branch manager, had handled my commercial lending when I'd expanded the construction business, and she knew better than most people what my financial position looked like. "Richard, you're here early. What brings you in before 8 in the morning?" I settled into the chair across from her desk, noting how she'd decorated her office for Christmas. Family photos mixed with holiday cards from grateful customers, the kind of personal touches that made banking feel less impersonal. The kind of warmth I'd been hoping to find at Emma's dinner table next week. "Linda, I need to discuss some significant account changes. Specifically, I want to withdraw my backing from a loan I co-signed several years ago." Her fingers moved across her keyboard, pulling up account information that told the story of my relationship with Emma in dollars and cents. This would be the mortgage for Emma's house? That's correct. I need to understand the process for removing myself from that obligation. Linda's expression grew cautious. She'd been in banking long enough to recognize the warning signs of family financial disputes, and she understood the complications that could arise when personal relationships intersected with legal obligations. "Richard, as a co-signer, you're legally responsible for the full amount of the loan. The only way to remove that responsibility would be for Emma to refinance in her own name, which would require her to qualify based solely on her income and credit history." I'd expected this answer, but hearing it confirmed made the next phase of my plan clearer. "And what happens if she can't qualify for refinancing?" "Then the loan would need to be satisfied in full, either through payment or through sale of the property." Linda leaned forward, her voice dropping to the confidential tone she used for sensitive discussions. "Richard, may I ask what's prompted this inquiry? Because forcing a family member into foreclosure is a step that can't be undone." Foreclosure. The word hung in the air between us like smoke from a house fire. I hadn't used that term in my own thinking, but Linda was right. If Emma couldn't refinance the mortgage in her own name, and if I demanded to be removed from the obligation, the inevitable result would be the loss of her home. The home where Jake had taken his first steps, where Sophie had learned to ride her bicycle in the driveway, where I'd spent countless evenings helping with homework and reading bedtime stories and being the grandfather they deserved. Linda, sometimes people need to learn the true cost of their choices. Emma has decided she doesn't need my presence in her life anymore. I'm simply giving her the independence she's asked for. I understand the emotional component, Richard, but the financial consequences could be devastating for her and the children. I thought about Sophie's drawing on my refrigerator, the one where she'd used purple crayon to write, "I love Papa," in shaky kindergarten letters. I thought about Jake's proud smile when he'd shown me the model airplane we'd built together last summer. I thought about the Christmas mornings we'd shared, the bedtime stories, the ordinary moments that had made me feel like the luckiest grandfather in Colorado. Linda, the children will be fine. They'll have their father back, which is apparently what they need. And Emma will learn to manage her finances the way single mothers do when they don't have generous fathers subsidizing their lifestyle. By the time I left the credit union, I had initiated the process that would force Emma to face the reality of her financial situation. Within 30 days, she would need to qualify for a new mortgage based solely on her income as a part-time bookkeeper, or she would need to sell the house and find somewhere more affordable to live, somewhere that Marcus could help her afford, assuming his music career had become more lucrative during his 3-year absence from parental responsibilities. My next stop was the law office of Mitchell, Chen and Associates, where Margaret was waiting with documents that would formalize the financial restructuring I'd requested. The conference room smelled of leather and coffee, the kind of professional environment where life-changing decisions were reduced to signatures on legal documents. Richard, I want to make sure you understand the implications of what we're doing here today. Margaret spread the papers across the polished table like a dealer laying out cards in a high-stakes game. Trust documents, account transfers, modification of beneficiary designations, and authorization forms that would give me complete control over assets Emma had assumed would always be available for her family's benefit. These changes will remove Emma's access to the college funds you established for Jake and Sophie. She'll have no input into educational decisions or access to those resources until the children reach 25. I signed my name with steady hands, thinking about the conversations I'd had with Emma about her children's futures, how important education was, how she wanted them to have opportunities she'd never had, how grateful she was that I'd made their college dreams financially possible. Margaret, Emma forfeited her input into these decisions when she decided I wasn't family enough to be included in Christmas. If she can exclude me from family gatherings, I can exclude her from financial decisions. And this document here terminates the monthly support payments you've been making to her household accounts. Another signature. Another step toward giving Emma the independence she'd demanded. No more automatic transfers to cover unexpected expenses. No more safety net when the washing machine broke or the car needed repairs or the children required things their mother's part-time income couldn't provide. Finally, this establishes your right to demand immediate satisfaction of any personal loans you've made to Emma over the years. The documentation shows approximately $47,000 in various emergency loans, home improvements, and other assistance. I paused before signing this final document. $47,000 represented years of saying yes when Emma called with financial crises, the new roof when the old one leaked, the kitchen renovation when she decided the original appliances weren't suitable, the car repairs that kept her reliable transportation running. All of it documented, all of it legally recoverable, all of it about to become Marcus's responsibility as the returning head of household. Margaret, I want this demand for repayment delivered to Emma on December 23rd. I want it to be part of her Christmas preparation. Richard, are you certain about the timing? Christmas Eve seems particularly harsh for this kind of financial shock. I thought about Emma's voice on the phone, bright with forced cheerfulness as she'd explained why I wouldn't be welcome at Christmas dinner. I thought about her casual dismissal of 3 years of devotion, her easy assumption that I'd simply disappear when my presence became inconvenient. Margaret, Emma chose the timing when she decided to exclude me from Christmas. I'm simply responding to her schedule. By noon, I had signed away Emma's financial security and restructured her children's futures, in ways that would take her years to fully understand. The woman who'd called me outside interference was about to discover exactly what life looked like without my interference. But I still wasn't finished. The most important part of my plan required a conversation with someone I'd never expected to contact again, someone whose return had triggered this entire sequence of events. I drove across town to the address I'd found through a simple internet search, my truck radio playing Christmas carols that sounded more like funeral dirges in my current mood. The apartment complex was one of those generic developments that housed people between more permanent arrangements, the kind of place where dreams went to regroup before either flourishing or dying completely. Marcus answered the door wearing the same confident smile I remembered from his wedding day 8 years ago, before life had taught him that charm wasn't enough to sustain a marriage or support a family. "Richard, this is unexpected. Emma didn't mention you were coming by." "Emma doesn't know I'm here, Marcus. We need to talk." He stepped aside reluctantly, gesturing toward a living room that looked like it belonged to someone who'd never quite settled anywhere. Boxes stacked in corners, a guitar leaning against walls that had never been painted, the temporary feeling of a man who'd been running from responsibility for so long he'd forgotten how to create a real home. "Coffee?" Marcus asked, though his kitchenette didn't look equipped for hospitality. "This won't take long." I remained standing, studying the man who'd walked away from everything I'd spent 3 years trying to hold together. He looked older, thinner, with the kind of restless energy that came from chasing dreams that stayed just out of reach. "I wanted to discuss your return to Emma's life." His smile flickered uncertainly. "Look, Richard, I know this situation is complicated. Emma told me about Christmas, and I want you to know it wasn't my idea to exclude you." The lie came so easily, I almost admired his skill. "Marcus, let's skip the diplomatic nonsense. We both know you orchestrated this reunion, and we both know you see me as an obstacle to your fresh start." He sat down heavily on his second-hand couch, the confident facade cracking slightly. "Richard, I made mistakes. I know that. But I love Emma and the kids, and I'm ready to be the husband and father they deserve." "Are you?" "Because being a husband and father requires more than good intentions and Christmas morning sentiments. It requires financial stability, emotional maturity, and the ability to put your family's needs ahead of your own desires." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I've changed. I'm not the same man who left 3 years ago." I looked around his sparse apartment, noting the past due bills stacked on his counter, the empty refrigerator visible through the open kitchen doorway, the general atmosphere of someone barely managing his own life, let alone prepared to support a family. "Marcus, do you know what Emma's monthly expenses are? The mortgage payment, utilities, groceries, children's activities, medical insurance, car payments, all the ordinary costs of raising 2 children?" "We'll figure it out together. That's what married couples do." "Emma's mortgage payment alone is $2,800 a month. Her take-home pay from the bookkeeping job is approximately $2,200. That's a $600 shortfall before we even discuss utilities, food, or the children's needs." The color drained from his face as the numbers hit him. "I thought her job paid more than that." "It doesn't. Which is why I've been covering the difference for 3 years, along with the emergency repairs, medical expenses, school supplies, birthday parties, Christmas presents, and everything else that comes with being responsible for a family's welfare." Marcus ran his hands through his hair, the same nervous gesture I remembered from his wedding day when he'd realized the magnitude of the commitment he was making. "How much are we talking about, Richard?" I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the financial documentation I'd compiled over the past 2 days. Monthly support averages about $3,000. Emergency expenses over 3 years total approximately $47,000. The down payment I provided for the house was $62,000. College funds for the children currently total $138,000. Marcus stared at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. "You've spent that much?" "I've invested that much in my family's security. The same family you abandoned to chase your music career, and the same family you're now asking to take back without any apparent plan for supporting them financially." He stood up abruptly, pacing to his window that looked out over a parking lot filled with cars that had seen better days. "Richard, I know I owe you an apology. I know I left Emma in a difficult position, but people change. I've learned from my mistakes. Have you?" Because from where I'm standing, you look like the same man who walked away when responsibility became inconvenient. The same man who missed birthdays, school plays, and bedtime stories because your dreams were more important than your children's needs. Marcus turned back toward me, his eyes flashing with the first genuine emotion I'd seen since arriving. You don't know what it was like, Richard. The pressure, the expectations, the feeling like I was suffocating under everyone else's definition of what my life should look like. I know exactly what it's like, Marcus. I know what it's like to work jobs you hate to provide for people you love. I know what it's like to sacrifice your own dreams because your family's security matters more than your personal fulfillment. That's what being a man means. So what are you saying? That I should just give up and let you continue playing father to my children? The question hung between us like a challenge, and I realized we'd finally reached the heart of the matter. This wasn't about Emma's financial security or the children's needs. This was about two men who'd both claimed the role of protector and provider, and only one of us had actually fulfilled those responsibilities. I'm saying that if you want your family back, you need to prove you can support them, not just emotionally, but practically. Emma is about to lose the financial safety net I've provided for 3 years. Her monthly shortfall will be your responsibility now. The emergency repairs, medical expenses, and unexpected costs will be your problem to solve. Marcus's face went pale again. What do you mean she's losing your support? I mean that starting January 1st, Emma will be living on her actual income instead of the subsidized lifestyle I've been providing. The automatic transfers will stop. The emergency credit line will be closed. The backup account for household expenses will be emptied and closed. Richard, you can't just abandon them like that. Jake and Sophie need stability. The irony of Marcus lecturing me about abandoning children was almost too perfect. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm giving you exactly what you've asked for. The opportunity to be the provider and protector your family needs. The chance to prove you've changed and grown into the man Emma deserves. He sank back onto his couch, the weight of responsibility settling over him like a heavy blanket. I don't have that kind of money, Richard. I barely make enough to cover my own expenses right now. Then you'd better figure it out quickly, because Emma's mortgage payment is due on the 1st of every month, and the bank doesn't accept good intentions as currency. I walked toward his door, my hand on the knob before turning back for one final observation. Marcus, for 3 years I've been the man Emma called when things went wrong. I've been the grandfather her children depended on, the steady presence that made their lives possible. You want to replace me? Prove you can do the job. Richard, wait. Maybe we can work something out, some kind of arrangement where we both help support them. I paused, looking back at this man who'd walked away from his family when they needed him most, and was now trying to negotiate terms for his return like he was buying a used car. Marcus, there is no we anymore. Emma made that clear when she uninvited me from Christmas. You wanted to be the head of household? Congratulations. The job is yours, along with all the responsibilities that come with it. What about the kids' college funds? Jake's been talking about wanting to study engineering, and Sophie loves art. They're going to need that money for their education. This was the part of the conversation I'd been dreading, but it was also the most important lesson Marcus needed to learn. The college funds have been restructured. Emma no longer has access to them, and neither do you. If Jake and Sophie want higher education, you'll need to find another way to provide it. Marcus stood up, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. That's not fair to the children, Richard. They didn't ask for this situation. You're absolutely right. They didn't ask for their father to abandon them for 3 years while chasing dreams in Nashville. They didn't ask to have their security dependent on their grandfather's generosity. They didn't ask for their mother to choose her ex-husband over the man who'd been supporting them since their father left. I opened his door, cold December air rushing into his overheated apartment. But they're about to learn what happens when the adults in their lives make selfish choices, and you're about to learn what it actually costs to be the man you should have been all along. The drive back to my house gave me time to think about the expression on Marcus's face when I'd outlined Emma's real financial situation. The slow dawning of understanding that being a husband and father meant more than showing up for Christmas dinner and promising to do better. The growing realization that his return would require him to step into responsibilities he'd never actually handled before. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Emma's phone call 3 days ago. Not satisfaction exactly, but a sense of completion. The first phase of my plan was in motion, and by Christmas morning, Emma and Marcus would have exactly what they had asked for. Each other, their children, and complete independence from the grandfather who'd apparently been nothing more than a convenient source of support. My phone was ringing as I walked through my front door. Emma's name on the screen, probably calling to discuss whatever conversation she'd had with Marcus after he'd processed our meeting. I let it ring, then listened to her voicemail while I made myself a late lunch. "Dad, Marcus said you stopped by his apartment today. He seemed really upset about something, and he won't tell me what you two discussed. Can you please call me back? I'm worried about what's happening between all of us." Worried. Now she was worried, after 3 days of casual dismissal and breezy assumptions that I'd simply accept being excluded from Christmas. After years of taking my support for granted while treating me like a convenient relative who could be managed and manipulated when necessary. I deleted the voicemail and opened my laptop to review the emails from Dave Patterson confirming the financial restructuring. Everything was proceeding according to schedule. By December 23rd, Emma would receive legal notification that her financial safety net had been removed. By Christmas Eve, she would be facing the reality of supporting her household on her actual income instead of the subsidized lifestyle I'd been providing. And Marcus would be facing the reality of what it actually meant to be the man of the house. My next call was to Tom Bradley to check on the progress of the special Christmas project we'd discussed. Tom answered on the first ring, his voice carrying the enthusiasm of someone who understood the importance of making a dramatic statement. "Richard, I've got good news and better news. The good news is we've got everything ordered and the crew scheduled for Christmas Eve morning. The better news is it's going to be even more spectacular than we originally planned." I settled into my office chair, looking out at the bird feeder Emma had installed 2 summers ago. A pair of cardinals was pecking at the seeds I'd scattered that morning, their bright red feathers stark against the gray December sky. "Tom, walk me through the timeline one more time. I want to make sure everything happens exactly as planned." Crew arrives at 5 in the morning on December 24th. We'll have everything in place and operational by 8 a.m., which should be perfect timing for when the family wakes up on Christmas Eve. "And you're certain about the visual impact? I want this to be something they'll never forget." Tom's laughter carried genuine excitement. "Richard, in 30 years of construction, I've never worked on a project quite like this one. When Emma and Marcus wake up Christmas Eve morning, they're going to understand exactly what kind of grandfather they decided they didn't need anymore." After hanging up with Tom, I spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing documents and making final arrangements for the financial restructuring that would take effect after the holidays. Each signature, each authorization, each legal notification represented another step toward giving Emma and Marcus the independence they'd demanded. Some gifts, I was learning, could only be properly appreciated after they'd been taken away. And some lessons could only be taught through the kind of loss that forced people to understand what they'd actually been taking for granted. My phone buzzed with another text from Emma. "Dad, please talk to me. Whatever's happening between you and Marcus, we can work it out. The kids are asking where Papa is, and I don't know what to tell them." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling the familiar tug of love and longing that had made me such an easy target for manipulation over the years. The kids were asking for Papa. Of course they were. Because for 3 years, I'd been the reliable presence in their lives while their father pursued dreams that mattered more than bedtime stories. But Emma had made her choice. She'd chosen Marcus over me, chosen her fantasy of reconciliation over the reality of who had actually been there when things got difficult. Now she could explain to Jake and Sophie why Papa wasn't coming for Christmas, and why their comfortable life was about to change in ways they were too young to understand. I typed back a single word, busy. Then I turned off my phone and walked to my kitchen to prepare dinner for one. Tomorrow would bring more arrangements, more legal notifications, and more steps toward the Christmas morning that would teach Emma and Marcus what independence actually cost. But tonight, I was going to enjoy the quiet satisfaction of knowing that for the first time in 3 years, I was putting my own needs first. And for the first time since Emma's phone call, I was genuinely looking forward to Christmas morning. Some presents, after all, were worth waiting for. The construction crew finished their work at 7:30 on Christmas Eve morning, just as the first light was breaking over Emma's neighborhood. I watched from my truck parked 3 blocks away as they loaded their equipment and drove off, leaving behind the most expensive Christmas gift I'd ever given. On Emma's front lawn stood a massive billboard, professionally constructed and impossible to ignore. 20 feet wide by 12 feet tall, with bold red letters against a white background that could be read from the street. Merry Christmas, Emma and Marcus. Your independence, gift from Papa. No more financial support, no more emergency loans, no more college funds. Marcus, the bills are all yours now. Love, the grandfather you didn't need. My phone started ringing at 8:15, Emma's name flashing over and over as neighbors began their morning routines and discovered the neighborhood's new landmark. I didn't answer. This was their Christmas morning now, and they could handle it without outside interference. By New Year's Day, the for sale sign had joined my billboard in Emma's front yard. Marcus had lasted exactly 1 week trying to cover a mortgage payment he couldn't afford and household expenses that exceeded his monthly income by more than he made in 3 months. Sometimes the most valuable gifts are the ones that teach us what we've lost. Emma learned that lesson surrounded by moving boxes and real estate agents, while Marcus learned that being a man requires more than good intentions and Christmas morning promises. And me? I learned that respect isn't something you can buy with generosity, and love isn't something you can earn through sacrifice. Some relationships are worth fighting for, but others are only worth walking away from with your dignity intact. The billboard stayed up for 30 days, exactly as the permits allowed, long enough for the whole neighborhood to understand what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness and generosity for obligation.